What's up, internet? My name is Kyle, back with another video about cameras, tech, and all that good stuff. Today, we're going to talk about the Sony 35mm f1.8 versus the Sigma 30mm f1.4. So I recently made a video about the Sigma, the 30mm f1.4 for Sony E-mount cameras, and I used it on my Sony a6000. If you're interested in the individual videos for each lens, I will link both of them down in the dungeon below, as well as a playlist down below for the different lens comparisons that I've done in the past. So real quick, I want to get into the specs, very short specs list. This is not going to be a super technical video. I don't care about DxO mark scores and how many lens elements are inside. That other channels can specialize in. This channel, I kind of just go over using the lens in real life scenarios, how much I enjoy each lens, and their pros and cons, and of course showing you a bunch of photo examples and video examples, which we'll do in just a second. But let's go over the specs first. So first you have the Sigma 30mm. Its maximum aperture is f1.4. Love that. And I also love the price. Currently right now, it's $273 US on Amazon. I've seen it dip below that. I bought mine at $260. Go figure. It has a 52mm filter thread, and it is 9.3 ounces or 0.58 pounds. The thing is a little hefty for its size. And then last but not least, it does not have any form of image stabilization. Then the other lens, the Sony 35mm, it has a maximum aperture of f1.8. It's currently $423 on Amazon, US dollars right now, so it is definitely the pricier of the two lenses. It has a 49mm filter thread. The lens weighs 5.4 ounces or 0.33 pounds, so it is a lot lighter than the other lens, the Sigma. And last but not least, the Sony does have OSS, which is optical steady shot, which is Sony's lens image stabilization. Okay, so those are the basic kind of specs, aperture, price, weight, all those little things. Now let's get into the actual photo examples and video examples. For me personally, I just take the lenses out, one camera, shoot a shot, and then shoot a very, very similar shot. If not, hopefully an exact shot with the same lens. There's going to be some variance in between. I didn't want to just set it on a tripod and take a picture. I will have some of those at the end, but most of it is handheld, just kind of out living my life, using the lenses in the photography that I like to shoot. And yeah, so let's see what you think of the photo examples. Okay, so now that you have seen all of the example footage and photos, what are your thoughts? Where are you at? Is the Sigma in front? Is the Sony in front? And let's go from there. So let's talk pros and cons for each of the lenses. Okay, so let's go over the Sigma 30mm f1.4 first. One, it's sharper in my opinion than the Sony lens. I didn't think I would believe that after reviewing a bunch of photos over and over. It is not a huge margin by any measure, but I could just tell once I got the photos side by side that the Sigma was a little sharper. So kudos to Sigma for making a sharper lens than Sony. Another pro is that the Sigma lens is extremely fast with autofocus, even though it's a non-native lens. For me, a native lens is a lens that doesn't need an adapter and that is made by the camera manufacturer. So a Sony lens on the Sony a6000, native lens. A lot of other manufacturers can't claim that. You know, sometimes a third-party lens just doesn't work out as well, but the 30mm is really close to native performance with autofocus. Another pro for the Sigma is its low light performance. So it has an f1.4 maximum aperture. It just allows this lens to let in more light than the Sony 1.8 aperture. 1.4 lenses aren't, everywhere for APS-C cameras, and Sigma makes 3 of them, one being the Sigma 30mm, and I love that. And of course, a lot of people love the f1.4 for that bokeh, which is super creamy, super great, and yeah, I need to stop saying super so much. Also, this lens has great build quality. I'm really just impressed each time I get my hands on a Sigma lens. We have the 16, love that thing. Now I have the 30mm, and I really am a fan of the way Sigma makes their lenses, and I hope they keep kind of that same quality going forward if they do ever come out with more APS-C lenses for Sony cameras. I have it here in my list, but I kind of just mentioned it. The focus ring on the Sigma is better, in my opinion, for any manual focus scenarios. It pretty much takes up a giant portion of the lens. It's super grippable. Is that even a way to describe it? You can get a better grip on it. It's rubberized. It's really easy and smooth. And yeah, better focus ring on the Sigma. And then last but not least in my list of pros is the price. It is around, I think it's $273 now, but I got mine for $260. I think it varies from week to week depending on, how many are in the warehouse or what have you. An amazing price just overall, flat out. I can definitely say now this is a great lens to upgrade from the kit lens because that price is just so attractive to get right into taking better quality pictures than say your kit lens. So yeah, that is a huge pro for this lens. The price and then the performance you get for that price is really great. Okay, so let's go over the cons for the Sigma 30mm. The first one, right out the gate, probably the biggest one for me, is the weight. It's double the weight of the Sony 35mm, and you really notice it. When I took it out of the box, I was like, whoa, this little guy is a little chunky. He's a little hefty. Nothing wrong with, having a little extra fat, but this guy, you can just notice it compared to the Sony. I like to keep a light setup, and yeah, it was a little surprising how heavy this little thing was. The next con is that it was a little bigger than I was expecting. I think it's about double the length, without the lens hood on there, of the Sony 35mm. Obviously, the lenses don't extend. And yeah, just kind of took me by surprise a little bit. And another con is the focus motor. You can actually hear its audible noise when it's focusing. But it's just, it's something that you would have to be aware of if you're doing like interviews with the 30mm. That's probably a good length for interviews. You would have to use an external mic for that. Relying on your on-camera mic with the Sigma lenses for Sony cameras is a little risky, if not unusable. You're going to hear the autofocus motor churning and churning. Another con is it does not have OSS. Now, I feel like a lot of people that have wanted this video wanted me to go over this, but In my personal use of these lenses, it's not the biggest deal in the world. With the Sigma, I either go down to f1.4, let more light in, and I can shoot at a little bit faster of a shutter speed. And with the Sony, with the OSS, I can slow down my shutter speed a little bit, and I can shoot at f1.8, which is as low as it goes, and I can get relatively similar results from both lenses. I am not a filmmaker. I'm a YouTuber. I don't use the 35mm all that much for B-roll, and when I do, I'm using like a camera strap for tension and things like that. It's just, OSS in my opinion is not the biggest deal. For you though, depending on your situation, it may be a bigger con. Like the focus motor noise may be a bigger con. So it really just depends on what you're using this lens for. Me, as more of a photojournalistic photographer, it's really not that big of a deal. And then last but not least for the Sigma is the autofocus is not as good as the Sony. I know I had it listed as a pro, that it's good for a lens that's not a native lens, but I just wanted to put in the cons that the autofocus is below the Sony's. I was doing a test where I was taking a picture of a coaster I had propped up, and then I was taking a picture of a wall, and I was going back and forth, up and down between the subjects that are different distances, and a couple different times, not just once, I had focusing issues. It was a little lower light, wasn't super bright, and it was having a really tough time focusing on the object and then focusing on the background and then going back and forth. With the Sony, I never ran into that problem. I probably tested this like 5 to 10 times, and a couple of times the Sigma just was not capturing the focus on the thing that I wanted to shoot. I feel like it would come up more down the road, so it is definitely something to keep in mind. Again, you know, it's a non-native lens. I think Sony will kind of always have the edge, you know, at least for now, in the focusing department versus a non-native lens. Okay, now let's talk about the pros and cons for the Sony. Okay, so first pro for the Sony is that it is a sharp lens. I feel like I was kind of talking up the Sigma sharpness, and it is sharper than the Sony, but the Sony 35 is still a very sharp lens. I don't want to, you know, downplay the Sigma being better, but just know that the Sony is still a sharp lens. Okay, next is kind of the same thing, is that it is good in low light. It is an f1.8 lens. It's not f1.4, but you have OSS. It is an overall good low light performing lens. Rolling into that, the next pro is OSS. You know, I kind of beaten this to death at this point in the video. Obviously, it is a good thing to have OSS versus not having it. I think that's probably part of the reason why this lens is more expensive than the Sigma lens. And, you know, some people will get a lot of benefit from the OSS. You know, if you have really shaky hands, if you like to take video a lot, getting those micro jitters out, it's going to help you a lot. So for some people, this is going to be a great thing. For some people, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Like myself, OSS, in my opinion, is not the biggest deal in the world, but it is a pro for this lens. Next is a big sticking point for me, which is its small size. Take the lens hood off of this thing, and it's like virtually a pancake lens. When I first got it, that was one of the main reasons why I bought it, is it wasn't this big, chunky, you know, huge lens that made my small a6000 feel like counterintuitive. So it is a great companion for the Sony a6000. I definitely recommend it for travelers and things like that who kind of just put it in your purse or even put it in your, you know, jacket pocket during the winter. You can, you know, store it in there nice and easy, take it out, take some amazing quality shots with your little lens and little camera and blow people's minds. And then a companion to the small size is the small weight. It is a very light lens. It's, I think, virtually half the weight as the Sigma, so you don't really notice it as a hindrance or anything like that. And then the last pro for the Sony is its autofocus is really quite amazing, in my opinion. It is better than the 30mm, and it is better than the Sigma 16mm, which I use for all of my videos, and the autofocus is amazing for the 16mm, but I feel like the Sony 35mm just has the best autofocus out of any, you know, lens I own for the Sony a6000. Okay, there's a couple cons for the Sony. The first one being thing is pricey. It's over $400. It's kind of hard to recommend that to somebody who just got into photography or somebody who's looking to upgrade from their kit lens. It's like, oh, hey, here's a lens that costs as much as your camera, but as we all know, you need to invest in glass, and glass is not cheap. But it is a con for this lens being that quite pricey. Okay, and then two other cons for this kind of roll into what we've talked about previously, is that it is not f1.4, it's an f1.8, and it is not as sharp as the Sigma. So even it has better autofocus, but it is not as sharp as the Sigma 30mm. So kudos to Sigma on that. It's kind of amazing to have a sharper lens and it be, you know, $200 something versus a lens that is $400 something, and you can see the sharpness difference. So yeah, that is a con for the Sony. Even though it is a sharp lens, it's not as sharp as the Sigma 30mm. Okay, so that is the pros and cons for each lens. You've seen sample photos and sample videos of both lenses, and we went over the specs of each. So the winner for me on which lens I like to put on my camera and use more often is the Sony 35mm f1.8. Now, it's funny to me because I feel like in this video, I've talked up the Sigma 30mm more than the Sony 35mm. That's because the Sigma is a great lens. It is a really great lens. It's newer to me than this lens, but I tried to set any bias aside and just choose the lens that I think is better. And in my opinion, it is the Sony 35mm. I think having the OSS is just in general better. It's not, you know, something that helps me in the most amazing ways, but having it is, you know, just a safer bet, and it's a great technology to have rather than no stabilization. f1.8 is plenty bright for me, and then the autofocus is second to none, and I love the size and weight of this lens. Like, take this lens cap off, look how small this thing is. You put this on your Sony a6000, you're off going, and it looks like the kit lens, like the same size. It's a little heavier than the kit lens, but for me, that is just a perfect combination of image quality, autofocus ability, aperture, and size and weight, and I'm just off running. The Sigma is just a little too heavy compared to this. If they were both the same weight and size, I might pick the Sigma over the Sony, and if I didn't already have this, I probably wouldn't buy this if I already had the Sigma. If you don't have either of these lenses and you're just on a budget, just starting out, just upgrading from the kit lens, get the Sigma 30mm. If you are looking for a, you know, a lighter, smaller lens that still has great quality, great low light, and you think you want image stabilization because the a6000 does not have it in body, or say you have the 6100 and it does not have that in body, get the Sony 35mm. I don't think you'll be disappointed with either option, and hopefully this video helped you choose maybe one over the other, or if you want to invest in one because you already have the other one. But yeah, for me personally, it is the Sony 35mm that is my winner. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for all of the support that you guys show me in the comments and likes and on Instagram, everywhere and everywhere. I sincerely appreciate that. All right, I will see you guys in the next episode. Later.